want written on your gravestone? Now, I know that's a little morbid, but at the end of your life, what really matters? How much money you made, what you accomplished, where you traveled? I've been a pastor for over 25 years, and I've officiated over 150 funerals. And that means I've had a unique vantage point to see what life looks like when people are dealing with the end of it. And when life ends, you get this vivid picture of what mattered while it was happening. And I want to pass on some of those learnings to you. So I'm going to start by giving a little insight into why participating in lots of funerals can help me understand what matters. And then I'm going to give a few of my top takeaways from that experience and what it means to our lives. So we'll start with one of the weirdest and most insightful passages in the entire Bible. Now, this is a passage I use at nearly every funeral I've ever been a part of. It's found in the book of Ecclesiastes, and keep in mind what Ecclesiastes is. So Solomon, who was called by God the wisest man who ever lived, reaches the latter years of his life, and he's looking at life through the eyes of wisdom and trying to figure out what matters. And in chapter 7, he says this: "It's better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. For death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart." In other words, it's better to go to a funeral than a party. He sounds like a laugh a minute, doesn't he? That's a weird thing to say. Why would he say it? Well, having spent more time in the house of mourning than the average person, just by virtue of what I do for a living, I think I know why. You see, in the house of feasting, a party, you talk about everything from the weather to a favorite TV series that you're binging. The whole idea, most of the time, is to keep things light and fun, obviously. But at a funeral, things shift. People are dealing with the heaviest stuff life has to offer. And in most cases, it makes them more tender, more open. They're more affectionate with each other. They openly tell their loved ones they love them. They often openly appreciate one another. They unify together. And Solomon gives his baseline reason. He says, "For death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart." Now, in the house of mourning, in other words, he's encouraging you to take it in because it's where you're headed. It's like the original Dead Poets Society speech. You're going to die. And it's good to live with that in mind. And that's not pessimistic, it's realistic. He says, take it to heart. You can learn great things while you're there if you stop and reflect. Now, as a pastor, when I get ready to officiate a funeral, I make it a practice to go in, whether I know the deceased or not, and I sit down with loved ones and friends and ask them to tell me about the person they love. What were they like? What made you love them? What were your favorite things about them? And the things they remember and are thankful for are the things I believe can teach you and I what matters. Now, let me give you a few that seem to rise up the most. Remember, character and authenticity matter. Just recently, I heard a widow say about her husband of 50 years. He was, quote, "the best husband I ever could have asked for." I once heard an adult son call his dad the most honest man he had ever known. And when I hear statements like this, I'm doubly impressed. Here's why. It's been said, success is when those who know me best admire me most. See, anyone can be impressive for the cameras or on social media or in the right controlled situation. But someone with character is who they are all the time, especially in their closest relationships. And when life is at its end, integrity and trust is one of the greatest legacies anyone can have. When those closest to you talk the highest about you, that matters. Second one is this. Remember, little things are often the big things. See, it never ceases to amaze me the kinds of stories people tell when they're missing someone. They don't focus on accomplishments generally. They certainly don't mention bank accounts. They focus on daily memories, personality traits they enjoyed. They talk about laughter, board games they played together, how you responded when you made a mistake, vacations, camping trips, your favorite foods. They talk about the things we often think are just the little things of life. But this shows us something that's genuinely important. Always remember, what you do with your days is what you do with your life. Each day, you're like building a legacy through how you treat those around you. Maya Angelou famously said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." Now, when people talk about your life, they talk about how you made them feel. You'd be surprised at what's remembered and cherished. Now, the good news around that is, remember, it celebrates your uniqueness if your uniqueness is joined to kindness and love and valuing others. The reason we miss our loved ones so desperately is because we know there's really no way to fill that very unique void that they left. Based on that, here's a good motto for life from Mother Teresa. She said, "We can't all do great things, but we can all do small things with great love." Now, the beauty of that is that kind of life value is available to anyone. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be anything. You just need to be someone who cares about others. So send that text and make someone's day. Listen to someone who's just has to unpack a rough time that they've had. While you're out to do great things, be encouraged to know that you're making a lot more of an impression than you imagine just by being kind, being considerate, funny, and encouraging. Now, finally, one more. Faith matters. Now, I know since I'm a pastor, it's almost like I'm expected to say this, but that's the point. When I think about what I've learned from spending a lot of time at funeral homes, I've watched the power and significance of faith on display over and over again. There's this very real and marked difference between people who were known to have lived for the Lord and those who just did their own thing. There's this greater joy and hope in the air as their lives are reflected on. In both cases, there's always grief. Of course there is. But I think about Paul's coaching to the church at Thessalonica. Grieve, but don't grieve as those who have no hope. I did one funeral where I had someone tell me it was the only time he had ever actually enjoyed being at a funeral, just hearing about this person's life. It didn't mean there weren't tears, but there was also a lot of laughter, and there was a lot of confidence that somehow this genuine follower of Jesus was more than okay than any of us were who was at their funeral, right? Now, I did another funeral recently that had some tragedy in it, and even some heartbreak. But on the other hand, people were doing this genuine kind of celebration of his life and were singing with passion about heaven and victory. Now, where does that come from? You see, the central claim of the Christian faith is that Jesus rose from the dead, literally and physically, in the same way we all die, literally and physically. And if that's true, it absolutely changes everything about death for those who trust and follow Him. It's the assurance that death is not the end of the story. It guarantees there's a volume 2 coming, because the Bible makes this strange and bold claim that Jesus was the first to resurrect of many. His resurrection was like this picture of what was coming for those who have faith in Him. Even though they die, they will live. Now, I would insist, after doing a lot of funerals, it's almost like you can sense it in the air, the hope of the resurrection. So take your faith seriously. Live it out authentically. You will be doing those you leave behind a huge favor when your day of death comes. I hope that helps. See you next time.